My straight teammate brought ice for my bruise, then held it on me with his mouth. This is the story of how a simple act of kindness turned into something much more complicated, blurring the lines between friendship and attraction in ways I never expected. Let me take you back to that pivotal day on the soccer field, where everything started with an injury that seemed so ordinary at the time. It was a sweltering summer afternoon, the kind where the heat rises in visible waves from the turf, and every movement feels like you're pushing through molasses. Our team had been practicing relentlessly for the upcoming regional championships, and Coach Martinez was pushing us harder than ever. I'd been on the varsity soccer team for 3 years now, but this season felt different, more intense, more important. Maybe because it was my senior year, or maybe because we actually had a shot at the title this time. Jason had been my teammate for just as long, though we'd never been particularly close. He was the team captain, tall with broad shoulders, and the kind of easy confidence that made everything look effortless. The golden boy with a girlfriend who was head cheerleader and a future that seemed mapped out with perfect precision. I, on the other hand, was still figuring things out, including the complicated feelings I sometimes had for guys like Jason, feelings I'd never quite acknowledged out loud. Let me explain why this matters. In a team setting, these unspoken dynamics can create invisible tensions that shape everything from how you pass the ball to how you celebrate a goal. I'd become an expert at maintaining the right distance, keeping my interactions with Jason friendly, but never too personal. It was a delicate balance that had served me well, until that day. We were running drills, practicing offensive maneuvers against the defense. I was playing forward, trying to break through the defensive line when it happened. I went for a sliding tackle at the same moment Jason lunged for the ball. Our legs tangled, momentum carrying us both forward, and I felt the sharp collision of his cleat against my thigh. The impact wasn't enough to take me down completely, but I stumbled, catching myself with one hand against the ground. "You okay?" Jason called out immediately, jogging over with concern written across his features. The rest of the team paused, all eyes suddenly on me. "I'm fine," I insisted, straightening up and brushing dirt from my shorts. The last thing I wanted was to be the center of attention, especially with the way Coach had been emphasizing toughness lately. But even as I said it, I could feel the throbbing starting in my outer thigh. The telltale warmth that promised an impressive bruise was forming. Coach blew his whistle, signaling a water break, and I limped slightly to the sidelines, trying not to make it obvious how much it actually hurt. I pulled up the edge of my shorts discreetly to check the damage, wincing at the angry red mark already darkening to purple. "That's going to be nasty tomorrow," came Jason's voice, suddenly right beside me. I quickly dropped the fabric, embarrassed to be caught checking my injury. "You should get some ice on that." "It's nothing," I shrugged, reaching for my water bottle. "I've had worse." Jason frowned, those blue eyes studying me with an intensity that made me look away. "Don't be stubborn. We need you at full strength for the championship. Wait here." Before I could protest, he was jogging toward the athletic building. I watched him go, confused by his sudden concern. We were teammates, sure, but Jason had never shown much interest in my well-being before. We existed in different social orbits. He was at the center of everything, while I orbited somewhere on the periphery, comfortable in my relative anonymity. The team was scattered across the field, some stretching, others chatting in small groups. Nobody was paying attention to me anymore, which was exactly how I preferred it. I took a long drink from my water bottle, trying to ignore the pulsing pain in my thigh. Maybe Jason was right. Ice would help, though I wasn't about to admit it. 5 minutes later, Jason returned with a plastic bag filled with ice, wrapped in a thin towel. "Here," he said, dropping down next to me on the bench. "Let me see it." I hesitated. There was something intimate about showing an injury, about accepting help. "I can do it myself," I said, reaching for the ice pack. But Jason shook his head, that determined look on his face that usually appeared when we were down by 1 goal with minutes left on the clock. "Just show me where it is. I took that first aid course last summer, remember? I know what I'm doing." Reluctantly, I pulled up my shorts just enough to reveal the bruise, now a mottled purple against my skin. Jason whistled low. "That's definitely going to hurt tomorrow. Here, this will help." He pressed the ice pack gently against my thigh, his hand steady. I tried not to flinch, both from the cold and from the unexpected contact. Jason had never touched me before, not like this, deliberate, careful. On the field, We had the usual physical contact of the game. Shoulder checks, high fives, the occasional helping hand up after a fall. But this was different. This was attention I wasn't prepared for. Hold it there for at least 15 minutes, he instructed, his voice taking on that captain tone he used during games. The sooner you ice it, the less it'll swell. I nodded, reaching to take the ice pack from him. But to my surprise, he didn't let go. Instead, he shifted slightly closer on the bench, maintaining the pressure on my thigh. We sat in awkward silence for a moment, the sounds of practice continuing around us. So, Jason said finally, "You ready for the history test tomorrow?" Such a normal question, as if there was nothing unusual about him sitting there, holding an ice pack to my thigh. I scrambled to respond naturally. Not really. I haven't had much time to study with all these extra practices. I know what you mean. Coach is really pushing us this year. Jason adjusted the ice pack slightly, his fingers brushing against my skin in a way that sent an unexpected shiver up my spine. But I think it's going to pay off. We've never had a team this good. The conversation continued, surprisingly easy despite the strange intimacy of the situation. We talked about classes, about the upcoming game, about the college scouts who'd been showing up to watch. All the while, Jason kept the ice steady against my bruise, occasionally lifting it to check the color before replacing it carefully. After about 10 minutes, the ice had begun to melt, water dripping down my leg. "This is getting messy," I observed, reaching for the towel to wipe away the droplets. "Here, let me," Jason said, and before I could react, he leaned down and, I still can't believe this happened. He pressed his mouth to my thigh, just above the bruise, and sucked up a droplet of water that was running down my skin. Time seemed to stop. I froze completely, unable to process what was happening. Jason looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and there was something in them I couldn't read. Mischief, maybe, or something deeper. Then he did it again, his lips cool from the ice, catching another droplet that was trailing down toward my knee. "What are you doing?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason straightened up, a slight flush on his cheeks that might have been from the heat or from something else entirely. "Sorry," he said, though he didn't sound particularly apologetic. "Just trying to help." That wasn't helping. I didn't even know what that was. My heart was racing, and I was suddenly very aware of how close we were sitting, of the warmth of his leg next to mine on the bench, of the fact that his hand was still holding the ice pack against my thigh. "I think it's good now," I said, taking the ice pack from him finally. Our fingers brushed in the exchange, and I tried to ignore the jolt that ran through me. "Thanks." Jason stood up, stretching casually as if nothing unusual had happened. "No problem. That's what teammates are for, right?" And then he winked, actually winked at me, before jogging back to the field where Coach was gathering everyone to resume practice. I sat there for a moment longer, trying to make sense of what had just occurred. Had Jason, straight, popular, girlfriend having Jason, really just put his mouth on my thigh? And more importantly, why had it affected me so strongly? I'd been attracted to guys before, had even had a few discreet encounters, but this was different. This was Jason, who existed in a completely different world than mine, who had never given me any reason to think he might be interested in guys, let alone in me specifically. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe it was just a joke, or a weird impulse that meant nothing. That had to be it. Jason was just being playful, in that overly physical way that some straight guys are, oblivious to how their actions might be interpreted. I rejoined practice, the bruise on my thigh forgotten in the wake of my confusion. Every time I caught Jason's eye across the field, he smiled in a way that seemed loaded with meaning, but I couldn't decipher what that meaning might be. Was he laughing at me? Testing me? Or was there something else happening here? Something I was afraid to even consider? After practice, I deliberately took my time in the locker room, waiting until most of the team had cleared out before I showered. I didn't think I could handle being around Jason right then, not with my thoughts in such disarray. But as I was getting dressed, I realized we were the only two left. "How's the leg?" Jason asked, pulling a clean t-shirt over his head. I tried not to notice the way the fabric clung to his still damp torso. "Better," I said, focusing intently on tying my shoes. "The ice helped." "Good." He was quiet for a moment, and when I finally looked up, he was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite place. "Listen, about earlier." My stomach dropped. Here it came. The explanation. The joke. The casual dismissal that would put everything back to normal and make me feel foolish for having thought, even for a moment, that it might mean something. Yeah, I prompted when he didn't continue. Jason ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen him make 100 times when he was nervous about a game. I don't know why I did that. It was weird, right? I shrugged, aiming for nonchalance. A little weird, yeah. He paused, seeming to search for words. I've been wanting to, I don't know, talk to you more, I guess. Get to know you better. This wasn't what I had expected. Why? The question came out more bluntly than I'd intended. Jason laughed, but it sounded forced. Why not? We've been teammates for 3 years, but I feel like I hardly know you. You're always so contained. Like you've got this wall up. He wasn't wrong. I did have walls, carefully constructed and maintained. They kept me safe, kept my secrets secure. I could say the same about you. I countered. Mr. Perfect Life. Something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe, or recognition. Is that how you see me? Isn't that how everyone sees you? Captain of the team, straight-A student, girlfriend who looks like she stepped out of a magazine. You've got it all figured out. Jason shook his head slowly. It's not like that. Not really. He took a step closer, and I resisted the urge to step back. Can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone else. My heart was racing again. That same adrenaline rush I'd felt when his lips touched my skin. Sure, I said, trying to sound casual. I broke up with Melissa last week. He said it quietly, as if saying it too loudly would make it more real. Or she broke up with me, really. She said I wasn't present, that I seemed distracted all the time. I'm sorry, I offered, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. That's rough. The thing is, Jason continued, taking another step closer, she was right. I have been distracted. But, he gestured vaguely between us. By thoughts I'm not sure what to do with. The air in the locker room suddenly felt too thin. Was he saying what I thought he was saying? It seemed impossible, and yet the way he was looking at me, the intensity in his eyes, made me wonder. What kind of thoughts? I asked, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. Instead of answering, Jason reached out, his fingers brushing against the spot on my thigh where the bruise was hidden beneath my jeans. Does it still hurt? I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. His touch was light, questioning, and entirely deliberate this time. I've never. Jason started, then stopped. This is new for me. These feelings. I don't know what they mean or what to do about them. But when I saw you get hurt today, all I could think about was that I wanted to make it better. And then when I was sitting there with you, it just felt right. Being close to you felt right. I'd imagined conversations like this so many times, with so many different guys, but never with Jason. Never with someone who seemed so firmly rooted in a world where these kinds of feelings weren't acknowledged, weren't allowed. It's okay to be confused, I said finally, because someone had to say something, and he looked so vulnerable standing there. This boy who'd always seemed so confident. These things aren't always straightforward. Jason laughed again, more genuinely this time. Yeah, I'm definitely getting that. He hesitated, then asked, have you always known? About yourself, I mean. It was such a direct question, so unexpected that it took me a moment to formulate a response. I think I've always known something was different, I said carefully. But understanding what that meant, accepting it, that took time. He nodded, absorbing this. And now? Are you okay with it? Most days, I answered honestly. It's not always easy, but it's who I am. I can't change it, and I wouldn't want to. I admire that, Jason said, and the sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. Being so sure of yourself. I had to laugh at that. Trust me, I'm not sure about most things. Just that one. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Well, that's one more thing than me. He glanced at the clock on the wall and sighed. I should go. My mom's expecting me for dinner. I nodded, simultaneously relieved and disappointed that the conversation was ending. Yeah, me too. We gathered our bags in silence, the moment, whatever it had been, passing. But as we walked toward the door, Jason stopped suddenly. Would you want to hang out sometime? Not at practice, I mean. Just to talk more. The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications neither of us was ready to fully articulate. I'd like that, I said finally. Jason's smile was like sunlight breaking through clouds. Great. I'll text you. And then he was gone, leaving me standing in the empty locker room, trying to process everything that had happened. The bruise on my thigh throbbed dully, a physical reminder of a day that had changed everything in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. As I walked home, I replayed the moment over and over. The cool press of his lips against my skin, the intensity in his eyes afterward, the vulnerability in his voice as he admitted his confusion. I didn't know what would happen next, if anything would happen at all. Maybe tomorrow Jason would pretend none of this had occurred, retreat back into the safety of his perfect life. But maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new, something unexpected and complicated and potentially wonderful. The bruise would fade in a few days, but I had a feeling the memory of Jason's mouth on my skin would linger much longer. That night, my phone buzzed with a text message. Ice always works better with a personal touch. How's the leg? And despite all my caution, all my carefully constructed walls, I found myself smiling as I typed my reply. The next few days were a strange dance of meaningful glances across classrooms, brief conversations in hallways that seemed charged with unspoken possibilities, and text messages that grew increasingly personal as midnight approached. We were testing the waters, neither of us quite brave enough to dive in completely, but both unwilling to retreat to the safety of the shore. At practice, Jason maintained his captain persona, professional and focused, but I noticed the way his eyes followed me more often, the way he found reasons to offer advice or encouragement that brought him into my space. And I found myself performing better, pushing harder, wanting to impress him in a way I'd never cared about before. The bruise on my thigh faded from purple to yellow, a visible timeline of this shifting relationship. Sometimes I caught Jason looking at it during practice when I wore shorts, a small smile playing at his lips as if remembering that pivotal moment. A week after the incident, Jason invited me over to his house to study for an upcoming chemistry test. His parents were at some charity function, he explained, so we'd have the place to ourselves. The implication hung in the air, unacknowledged but unmistakable. I spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear, settling finally on jeans and a simple blue t-shirt that a friend once told me brought out my eyes. As I walked to Jason's house, a sprawling two-story in the nicest part of town, I tried to manage my expectations. We were studying. That was all. Whatever was happening between us was new and fragile, and rushing would only break it. Jason opened the door before I could knock, as if he'd been watching for me. "Hey," he said, stepping back to let me in. "Come on up to my room. I've got everything set up." I followed him upstairs, trying not to stare at the family photos lining the staircase. Jason through the years, always smiling, always perfect. His room was exactly what I'd expected. Trophies lining a shelf, sports posters on the walls, everything neat and organized. Textbooks and notes were spread across his desk, 2 chairs pulled up side by side. "I thought we could start with the periodic table," Jason said, gesturing to the study guide he'd prepared. "That's what Mr. Benson said would be the focus." We settled into studying, and for a while, it was almost normal, just 2 teammates working together, quizzing each other on electron configurations and atomic weights. But I was acutely aware of every time our shoulders brushed, every moment our eyes met over a shared textbook. After about an hour, Jason stretched, his t-shirt riding up slightly to reveal a strip of skin above his jeans. "I need a break," he declared. "Want something to drink? We have soda, water, juice." "Water's fine," I said, using the moment alone to take a deep breath and steady myself. This was fine. Everything was fine. We were just studying. Jason returned with 2 glasses of water and sat down on his bed rather than back at the desk. "Come sit," he said, patting the space next to him. "The desk chair is killing my back." I hesitated only briefly before joining him, careful to leave a respectable distance between us. Jason took a long drink of his water, then set the glass on his nightstand, turning to face me more directly. "How's your leg?" he asked, and though the question was innocent enough, there was something in his tone that wasn't. "All healed," I replied, my mouth suddenly dry despite the water I'd just sipped. "Thanks to your first aid skills." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I'm glad I could help." He paused, then added, "Can I see?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning. This wasn't about checking a healing bruise, and we both knew it. This was about crossing a line we'd been dancing around for days. Slowly, I rolled up the leg of my jeans, revealing the faded yellow-green mark on my thigh. Jason leaned closer, his breath warm against my skin as he examined it. Almost gone, he observed, his voice lower than before. But I can still see it. And then, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, he traced the outline of the bruise with his fingertip, a touch so light it made me shiver. Jason, I said, his name half question, half warning. We were venturing into territory I wasn't sure either of us was ready for. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and the uncertainty I saw there was somehow reassuring. He was just as nervous, just as unsure as I was. Is this okay? He asked. Instead of answering, I reached out and placed my hand over his, holding it against my thigh. For a moment, we stayed like that, frozen in a tableau of possibility, both afraid to be the one to take the next step. And then Jason leaned forward, closing the distance between us, and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was tentative at first, questioning, but when I responded, it deepened into something more certain, more urgent. His hand slid up from my thigh to cup my face, and I found myself leaning into his touch, all my carefully constructed walls crumbling in the face of this unexpected connection. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Jason rested his forehead against mine. I've been wanting to do that since. Well, probably longer than I've been willing to admit to myself. I laughed softly, a release of tension I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That was definitely better than studying chemistry. I don't know, Jason countered with a grin. I felt some pretty strong chemical reactions happening there. The joke broke the last of the tension between us, and suddenly we were just two people navigating something new together. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. His fears about disappointing his parents, my experiences coming to terms with my sexuality, our shared dreams for the future. The chemistry textbooks lay forgotten on the desk as we created a different kind of chemistry between us. As I walked home that night, the cool air a welcome relief against my flushed skin, I marveled at how quickly life could change. A week ago, Jason had been a teammate, someone I admired from a distance but never imagined could be anything more. Now, because of a bruise and an ice pack and a moment of unexpected intimacy, we were embarking on something neither of us had seen coming. The bruise would fade completely soon, leaving no visible mark of that pivotal moment. But some marks aren't visible. They're felt in the quickening of a heartbeat, in the warmth of a shared secret, in the promise of possibilities yet to unfold. And as my phone buzzed with a goodnight text from Jason, I knew that while the bruise might disappear, the impact of what had started that day on the soccer field would remain, changing both of our lives in ways we were only beginning to discover. Total _char_count, 18,646.